Good morning, Warriors. Today is Thursday, January 15th, 2026. Welcome to the Morning Adrenaline. Hey, listen, let's start today with a quick question, especially if you have kids. And here's the question. When you look at children who do well, who perform well, who have friends, who succeed in school, who enjoy sports, who seem confident and respected, what are the traits that they share? Now, think about the moments when kids get into trouble at home, at school, with teachers, with friends, on sports teams. What's actually happening? Here's the part that most people miss. Have you noticed that the very traits that contribute to a child's success, when ignored or broken, are the exact same traits that lead to their failure? It's rarely intelligence or talent, it's character. So today, I want to talk about 4 rules I give my kids. We call them Daddy's 4 rules. They're simple rules. They're rules that didn't come from theory or parenting books. They came from observation. I watched my kids' behavior. I paid attention to their patterns, and I asked a simple question. What actually gets them into trouble? Not just at home, but in life, with teachers, with friends, on teams, in social situations, and of course with daddy. And once I saw the patterns clearly, the rules became obvious. So let me tell you where the rules actually came from. Here's what I noticed when I started paying attention. When my kids don't listen, they get into trouble. When they don't give effort, they struggle and frustrate those around them, including myself. And almost every major issue involves not being nice. Now, these 3 showed up over and over again. Then later, I noticed something else. I noticed my son starting to carry negative energy, frustration, complaining, pessimism. And I realized that even when nothing was technically wrong, something was still off with him. And that's when the 4th rule showed up: be positive. So that's how the list was built, not from theory, not from trends, but from patterns. And then something clicked. I realized that adults that struggle with the exact same 4 things get the exact same negative results, but the stakes are much, much bigger. And once I saw that, I realized this isn't really about kids at all. The 4 rules are simple. 1, listen. 2, try your hardest. 3, be nice. And 4, be positive. And I tell my kids this. It's actually very hard to get in trouble if you follow these 4 rules. Because when you listen, give effort, 100% effort, treat people well, and control your attitude, problems shrink fast. So then I zoomed out even more, and I realized something uncomfortable. It's actually very hard not to accomplish what you want in life if you follow these 4 rules. Yes, of course, adulthood has more moving parts, more pressure, more responsibility. But these 4 rules aren't tactics. They're a foundational character framework, an integrity framework. So regardless of your background, regardless of the work that you do, where you work, whether you run a business or you're an employee or self-employed, regardless of your circumstances, they don't just shape behavior, they shape how you use your body, how you run your mind, and how you build your soul. So here's why this actually matters more than you might realize. Most adults don't fail because they lack information. They fail because they abandon fundamentals. They complicate life. They look for hacks, shortcuts, motivation, and permission. They want external answers to internal discipline problems. But when you strip it all down, most breakdowns come from the exact same place. They stop listening, stop giving real effort. They stop treating people well, and they allow negativity to run their mind. That's when work gets heavy. Relationships get tense, health declines, and life starts feeling harder than it needs to be. So these rules don't just guide kids, they expose adults. The 4 rules aren't about being a better parent. They're about being a functioning human being. So, before we go any further, let me ask you a question of the day. If someone watched how you lived this week, they watched all of your actions, all of your motion, what you said, how you interact with people, not your intentions, not your beliefs, which one of these 4 rules would they say that you're violating right now? So now let's walk through each of these 4 rules, because what you learn to do as a kid is what you default to as an adult. Children don't just learn skills, they learn patterns. And those patterns become habits. Those habits become identity, and identity pours out of your behavior. That's why learning these things early matters, because adulthood doesn't create new behavior. It exposes what was never corrected. So let's start with the first rule. First rule is listen. And listening is obedience. Listening isn't obedience. Did I say is? Listening is not obedience. It's respect. Not just for the person talking, but respect for your own growth and development. When kids don't listen, they don't grow. Not because they're bad, but because they've already decided they know better. I see this consistently when I coach my kids in sports. Not just my kids, but other kids. When I'm a coach, I see this all the time. The kids who are talking while I'm running a drill or explaining a drill are always doing the drill wrong the very first time. Not because they lack ability or capability, but because they weren't listening to the instructions. Then they're confused, they're frustrated, and they fall behind. Now, translate that into adulthood. Do you want to be the person at work who misses instructions? Who has to redo assignments? Who keeps making avoidable mistakes? That's how trust erodes inside of your office. That's how opportunities pass you by. See, adults don't outgrow this. They just rename it. See, adults stop listening too. They stop listening to feedback that they don't like, especially. They might stop listening to their spouse. They give up or stop listening to their body or give up on their fitness, their conscience. And the result is the same. Mistakes multiply, progress slows, problems repeat. Listening is how information enters the mind. No input means no upgrade, no growth. A closed ear creates a stagnant life. And of course, here's the uncomfortable truth that we all know but don't always acknowledge. Most people prefer to talk instead of listen. They want to be heard. They want to be right. They want to look smart. But you don't grow by talking. You grow by listening. So strong kids listen and thrive. High-level adults do the same, because listening isn't actually passive as some may think. It's a discipline. Growth starts the moment you stop needing to be right. Now, let's talk about my favorite rule and the rule that changes everything. Try your hardest. Rule number 2. Trying your hardest is not, by the way, about perfection. It's about ownership. I tell my kids this all the time. Practice makes progress, not perfection. Never set an unachievable standard. It's character suicide. when I coach soccer, baseball, basketball, the number one thing I reward isn't talent and it's not winning, it's effort. I give an energy award at the end of every practice and every game to the kid that stays the most focused and works the hardest, not the kid that scored the most goals, the most baskets, or hit the home run. And I tell the kids something very simple. If you want to have fun, you have to give effort. Without effort, nothing is fun. That's not motivation. I'm not trying to motivate them. I'm trying to give them reality based on my experience. I know this. I've watched it for 5 years, and you can see it instantly. The kid jogging half speed is frustrated, disconnected, bored. I like to call it chasing butterflies. But the kid fully engaged, even if they're not the most skilled and most talented player, is alive and full of energy. A lot of times you can see their big smile from ear to ear, which you don't see on the other kid's face. See, effort changes their experience. So what I do is I hold a parents' meeting before every sports season, and I'm very clear with parents about my rules for the season. And I tell them, if I can't get your kid to give 100% effort at all times, they won't have fun, and therefore they will not come back next season. Not because the sport failed them, although you could argue if a kid goes through a full season like that, the coach probably did, but because low effort kills enjoyment. So that's why I coach my second graders really hard, like high schoolers. Not because I'm trying to break them, but because I respect their capacity. The same way I parent my 8 and 10-year-olds. I understand what they're capable of, and I hold them to that standard. And I also understand this. Whatever I allow them, they will repeat. If I allow them to be weak, to not give effort, to not listen, try your hardest, be nice, be positive, then that's what I'm going to get in return. Because those habits start to build their identity. Doesn't matter how old, they could be 4 years old. Habits form identity. A lot of you right now are carrying around identities that you developed literally at 4 years old that you need to get rid of, that you need to shake. See, low standards don't create freedom, they create weakness. Now, here's the flip side. And this is where the real payoff lives. Kids who learn to give full effort don't just perform better, they build trust with themselves. They learn, I can push through discomfort. I don't quit when it gets hard. I can rely on myself. That's not just confidence, that's earned belief. And that belief compounds. By the time that kid becomes an adult, effort isn't something they negotiate. It's automatic. They show up prepared. They finish what they start. They don't need external motivation. They have gritty. A word that I made up, but I coined that as motivated discipline, gritty. They build a power identity, one rooted on reliability. Now, fast forward to adulthood, and the contrast becomes obvious. Adults who learned effort early on in life build businesses methodically. They stay consistent in relationships. They train their bodies with discipline. And they handle pressure without collapse. Effort gives them options. It gives them resilience, momentum, and self-respect. Effort doesn't just create results, it creates identity, durability. Now, here's the part that most adults totally miss, mostly because they're afraid to push kids to their capacity. Requiring effort isn't pressure. It's protection. Let me say that again. If you push your kids hard, you're not applying pressure, you're giving them protection, not just from their current self, but from their future self. So kids who learn that practice makes progress, build confidence, develop pride, learn resilience, trust processes, and they problem solve. Kids who are allowed to coast avoid discomfort. They quit early. They externalize blame. Everything's somebody else's fault. They doubt themselves. And those patterns don't disappear. They mature in their subconscious mind. And by adulthood, they show up as inconsistency, entitlement, fragile confidence, and stalled potential, just to name a few. Effort is not a personality trait, it's a standard, and standards create identity. Look, effort isn't what you do when you feel good, but it is what makes life feel good. Now, let's talk about the rule most people misunderstand. Be nice. Being nice isn't weakness, it's control. And I'm relentless about this with my kids. Their mother and I both are. Because niceness doesn't just affect behavior, it shapes identity. Are you starting to see a theme here? We're talking about shaping identity in your children. We're talking about the identity that was shaped when you were a child that has pre-existed everything and still lives in you today. So again, this isn't about parenting, although it kind of is. Look, when your kids were little, or if you have grown kids, let me give you a better example. When my kids were really, really little, I bought them a little short kids book called Have You Filled a Bucket Today? And honestly, I think this should be a required read, not just for kids, but for adults too. And I still ask them to reread this book from time to time. And the message is really simple. When you fill another person's bucket, when you're kind, empathetic, inclusive, give someone a hug, your own bucket stays full. When you dip into other people's buckets, when you're bullying, sarcastic, cruel, say mean things, your own bucket stays empty. And that's not a childish thing. That's real world application. Have you ever noticed how unhappy bullies usually are? And how people who are consistently kind tend to be happier? It's not a coincidence. Meanness isolates, kindness connects. Kids that are mean don't become leaders, they become isolated. Other kids avoid them. Teachers lose patience. Coaches stop trusting them. And again, this pattern doesn't disappear with age. It only amplifies. Now, adults don't get away with this. They might just hide it better. Adults who are harsh, sarcastic, dismissive, or reactive don't build teams. They build resistance. People may comply, but they don't commit. They might listen, but they don't trust. They might choose to stay, but they don't respect. And that's not leadership, that's tolerated behavior. So let me give you a real example. 2 days ago at an awards ceremony for our kids to celebrate their strong grades, a dad came up to me and he told me how kind my daughter is to his son, who's actually very socially awkward. How she includes him, talks to him, looks out for him with the other kids. Now, listen carefully. My daughter is naturally kind. But make no mistake, this is by design. I've spent countless hours talking about kindness with my children. Going and introducing themselves to the new kid, inviting the shy kid into their group at lunch, at recess. and really putting themselves in someone else's shoes. Empathy is taught, kindness is trained. And because my kids are coachable, the work paid off. Being nice doesn't mean passive. It doesn't mean being weak. It doesn't mean avoiding hard conversations. It means being strong enough to regulate yourself under pressure. Anyone can snap, anyone can be cruel. That takes no discipline. This is where the childhood to adulthood line becomes very clear. Kids who learn kindness early build emotional intelligence, they earn trust, and they develop real confidence. Adults who carry that forward build strong relationships. They lead without intimidation. They live with less internal chaos. Unkind kids grow into unhappy adults. Kind kids grow into secure, grounded leaders. Now listen closely. Here's the line most people need to hear. If you can't control your tone, your reactions, or your ego, you're not strong. You're untrained. You're undisciplined. Strength without control becomes damage. Now, let's talk about the rule that, if not followed, quietly destroys more lives than any other. Be positive. Rule number 4 for my kids. Positivity isn't pretending everything's fine. It's choosing responsibility over victimhood. I didn't fully understand how important this was until my son's development turned into negativity. When he began losing confidence, when he started verbalizing doubt, when negativity started creeping into how he saw himself, into his identity. See, negativity is an absolute killer of everything good, especially relationships. Even small kids don't want to be around the negative kid. And here's the dangerous part. Negativity wires itself into the subconscious very easily. And once it's there, it's extremely hard to remove later in life. It's absolutely toxic. So negative people outsource their power. Positive people protect theirs. And being positive doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you look for solutions. You take ownership. You don't poison the environment around you. Teams don't often fail because of hard days. They fail because of negative energy. Families don't fracture from struggle. They fracture from pessimism. And positivity isn't optimism. It's leadership of the mind. Let me tell you a quick story from yesterday. I was coaching my soccer guys, and I have a kid who's in his second season with me. Great kid. But he struggles with focus and he struggles with taking directions. So I was having trouble with him yesterday, warned him a few times, and finally sent him to a timeout. And after a couple of minutes, I called him over real quick so I could coach him back up and get him back out on the field, pump him up, make sure he wasn't down. And I told him, you're one of my leaders. You played with me before. I look at you as a leader. And he looked at me and said something that honestly, it broke my heart. I don't want to be a leader. I asked him why. His response was, it's too hard. And that moment matters more than most people realize. This is a 8-year-old kid. Because that's not just a kid talking. That's a belief forming, and one that won't go away on its own. And if it's not squashed early, it will show up his entire life. This is how negativity can often show up. Not anger, not acting out, but avoidance of hard things. And if that belief isn't challenged early, it hardens. Kids that think that hard things are bad become adults who avoid responsibility, adults who avoid leadership, avoid growth, avoid pressure, avoid pretty much everything. The conversation went a little bit longer, but I tried to reframe it in the moment and it didn't land very well. So that's when I realized something important. This isn't a one conversation problem. It's a problem I need to take ownership of and train him out of. I have about 7 weeks to do it. So yes, I'm a volunteer coach, but I see it as my responsibility as a figure of authority, albeit for a very short time in his life, to do what I can do to make a difference because I have the skills and the power to do it. So I have built a strategy. I'm starting that tonight. I'll be kind of doing some of that, and maybe I'll keep you posted on how that goes over the next 7 weeks. Before the next 7 weeks, my focus with this kid is simple. Help him see himself as a leader, help him embrace hard things, and help him understand that difficulty is not danger, because hard things become easier with practice, with repetition, with confidence, and over the course of time. And confidence only comes from doing the thing you don't want to do. That's how belief is built. Now, fast forward to adulthood, and you can see the same pattern everywhere. Negative adults avoid challenges. They complain instead of solving problems. They drain the room and everybody in it. They sabotage their relationships. They literally can kill an entire company. Positive adults take responsibility. They build momentum in their life, every aspect, all 4 stories of their life. They stabilize environments. They grow under pressure. They galvanize the people around them. Negativity shrinks life. Positivity expands it. So here's the hard truth. Your attitude is not a personality trait. It's a practiced habit, and habits shape, here's that word again, your identity. Your attitude decides how heavy life feels. So let's be clear. These 4 rules aren't childish. They're foundational. They're the difference between people who feel stuck and people who steadily build something meaningful. Listen so you can grow. Try your hardest so effort turns into confidence. Be nice so your strength builds instead of destroys, and be positive so your mind stays sovereign. Not because life will be easier, but because you'll be harder to break. See, most people don't fail because life is unfair. They fail because they violate fundamentals and then wonder why everything feels really heavy. So here's the real question, and don't answer this lightly. If you lived by these 4 rules for the next 30 days, no exceptions, no excuses, no negotiating with your comfort, what would finally start working in your life? And more importantly, who would you become if you stopped violating the basics that you know matter? Work your body, feed your mind, build your soul. Wake up the warrior. I'll see you tomorrow.
Stuck in your mind, fighting shadows of a story you left behind.